Well, NBC Nightly News anchor Brian Williams will not be appearing on tonight's broadcast. I'm not talking about our show, but I'm talking about his show at 6:30 on NBC. He's taking a leave of absence from the show, and he also backed out of an appearance scheduled with David Letterman. That, of course, after, as you've heard, falsely reporting the turn of events that unfolded while he was on a Chinook helicopter in Iraq back in 2003. And ironically, Williams told the bungled war story to Letterman again in 2013.
Two of our 4 helicopters were hit by ground fire, including the one I was in.
No kidding.
RPG and AK-47.
What altitude were you hit at?
We were only at 100 feet doing 100 forward knots because we had these massive pieces of bridge beneath us on slings.
What happens the minute everybody realizes you've been hit?
We figure out how to land safely, and we did.
Not so much. Now, Williams apologized to the country last week and admitted to misremembering what happened on the helicopter. It turns out Williams was on a chopper that was not hit by enemy fire and that he was actually in a helicopter that was traveling behind the one that was hit and arrived at the scene an hour later. Now, Williams' accounts of other stories are also coming into question, including a report he delivered on Hurricane Katrina. Williams said that he could see bodies, or a body at least, floating down the street in the French Quarter. Williams also told Esquire magazine back in 2005 that he was held up at gunpoint in New Jersey during Christmas after working at a church Christmas drive. Red Bank residents say they doubt the incident ever took place. Last week it was reported that Williams' powerful nightly news predecessor, in fact also a figure still important around NBC to this day, Tom Brokaw, he wanted to see his replacement fired. However, Brokaw later denied such a claim. Okay, it's a lot of interesting things that have gone into this. We know from working in the news business how these things happen, and I think the expectations of anchors today versus years ago is different, but nonetheless, at least from what we know now, and there's an investigation going on internally among NBC to fact check some of the prior stories, etc., he's in trouble here. And I don't think he did himself any favors, or NBC did him any favors, where he kind of announced his own, how he'd handle it himself, that he was reportable seemingly to himself, that he'd take himself off the air for a few hours and he'd return when he basically felt ready for it. What's your sense? I'll start with you, Dom. Do you think you can recover from this when at the end of the day, if you can't, trust is the most important commodity of an anchor, especially in news, if you start losing that, and then punchlines and internet memes are, going on about you, can he get it back?
I'm pulling for Brian Williams. Full disclosure, I know him on a personal level. I really want him to make a comeback and succeed, but I just don't see it. I don't see it.
What do you think the biggest problem
Because
is?
what's going to happen now, let's be honest about this. For those of us that speak publicly, he's probably embellished quite a few stories. And right now, and embellish is a better word for lie. And right now, there's no other way to say it. Right now, all the fact checkers, and more importantly, all the haters of Brian Williams in this day of social media, they're going back and they're checking everything, looking for any little mistake. And the next one that comes up, NBC wants to stand by him, but I just don't see how it's possible.
#1 rated newscast in the evening news by a healthy margin, Andrew, and for NBC is related to their news division, clearly the one that was performing at least above the competitors' nightly news. They'd like him to come back, but how damaged goods is he?
I think it depends on what more is discovered. First of all, everything that's happened so far has been in anecdote. There's no indication that Brian Williams has inflated his reporting, so that on-the-air reporting for NBC, there's no indication
But doesn't matter. I've heard that argument before. It matters if he did it at the desk or if he mattered he did it in the on the sofa
I think
at
it
the
does
late
matter
show.
because, let's be honest, most people embellish at some point in their lives. Most people at a party.
I don't know about that.
I think most people.
I don't know about
I think
that.
most people do.
I'll agree with Andrew that everybody's inflated a story down, but he's talking about a war.
I understand.
He's talking about being shot down by an RPG. Andrew.
I understand. I understand. And so I think the width and the depth of this is going to be important. But also keep in mind, and I've heard a lot of comparisons, like, Walter Cronkite would never have been in that position and would never have, but Walter Cronkite would never have had to go on David Letterman or go on Jimmy Fallon or keep up the social media profile.
But let me stay with that with you. Let me stay with that with you, though, Andrew. You say he has to. To that degree, He's gone on Conan, I think 25 times I've heard. He was again going to be on Letterman. You know, it's not a compulsion he has to. And I do think, I mean, think about Peter Jennings, just as an example. Peter Jennings never was confused with the everyman. But Brian Williams, he tells a great story. He's a likable guy. He tells you how much he loves NASCAR. Even in retelling that story, he kept using the term we, like he was part of the military unit. In this effort to not only ingratiate yourself, but to be both slow jamming the news and then also delivering the news, can you really have it both ways? Or are you asking for trouble doing both?
Well, I think one of the reasons why he is in first place by as wide a margin as you referenced is because of the profile that he's got. The fact that he is a celebrity anchor, and he's a celebrity in his own right, and has hosted Saturday Night Live and been on all of these shows.
You invite a little trouble that way.
It does invite a little trouble, and it certainly seems to have bit him at this point. But I would submit to anybody who's complaining that Walter Cronkite would never have done this or found himself in this spot, or even Peter Jennings, or you want to go back to Ed Murrow, if you put those people's newscasts up today, nobody would be watching them. And there's a difference because the people's viewing habits have shifted. People want more than what they used to get and what they were able to get. Brian Williams has, taken advantage of that, and I think perhaps he's going to be victimized.
It should be said there are some internal voices. These are all second and third hand here. I'm not telling you I know this, that it's fact or not, but Jeannie, that for more than a year now, some people have been uncomfortable in Brian Williams' retelling of stories, and that he was known to embellish at times to make a good story a great story, to make an okay story a good story, whatever the threshold you want to use is. And people knew that there was eye rolling going on at some of this. You're the consumer now, more than us. This is Inside Baseball. How much of this matters to you? Does it matter the next time he tells you about a war story? Does it matter the next time he reports from a hurricane? Does it impact it or no?
And I am truly a consumer because I'm a fan of Brian Williams. I have liked him for a long time. And,
I think he's a guy to like.
And he's an easy guy to like. And, I do think it matters because as you mentioned early on, you have to trust the people that you're listening to and that you're getting news from. And if that trust is somehow compromised, it does become a problem. And, so I agree with Dominic that I think it's going to be hard for him to come back because which one of us could sustain that level of scrutiny? It's very, very tough. But I also agree with Andrew that, in the news business, people want it both ways. They want news and they want entertainment. And we know that at NBC, as everywhere else, those two often get conflated. And so here you've got a guy incredibly successful and a very good journalist by all accounts, but he is on both Conan and the NBC Nightly News. How do you sustain that? And if you don't do it, do you get those ratings?
I think Dominic, though, he intentionally put himself on more platforms than anyone else I can think of.
No doubt about it. Brian wanted to be a star, and he knew that he would.
And he had comic timing, which none of these guys
Let's
had.
be honest about this. It wasn't just about Brian. Brian was about building his family up. So by doing Conan, by doing the Tonight Show, his daughter's career now is extremely successful, where she's on HBO, and we're seeing newspaper stories where Brian was sitting there watching a movie with his daughter that she was in, and it was a scene where she had to make love in the movie, and so he's talking about these things publicly. Those are a no-no. I understand what he was doing, but if you're gonna do that, your stories have got to add up.
And I do think there's a difference between making up a story about whatever and making up a story when it comes to the military. There is a line that nobody pretends just because you wear a flak jacket that you're there with it. People have died. Recently. Look what happened to Dave Bloom. Look what happened to Bob Woodruff being severely injured and stuff. Let alone international journalists that died. I think you got to be really careful to use terms like we. It's like when guys talk about their team, like their favorite team, it's like we. I'm like, you're not playing, okay? You're watching like me on the couch, okay? It's them, okay? And when it comes to covering the military, whenever you say we and you're in a bed, no, you're not we.
I wish Brian Williams had been more careful investigating the lies that prompted the war that led to the incident that he was then covering and then apparently lied anecdotally about. I think that's a much bigger sin. You want to talk about lies in the military, that strikes me as being a much
But your
more
job
important
is to is to report.
Right,
It's not to
right,
make yourself
which I
the
wish
story.
the national media had spent more time
Okay.
investigating those lies.
I will say though, the new thing lately, and we don't even have to name the names, guys wearing way too tight T-shirts when they're covering a storm, or unbuttoning like 4 shirts, to show you're not the
Dominic?
story. Report the story.
Dom, that's
Yeah.
on you. That's,
Well, Dom, I was going to talk about the spandex, but that for another night. All right, when we come back here, thank you for that image. When we come back here, we will be talking some politics and no spandex, I promise. Stay with us.